The Shadows of Blackwood Forest. The Forbidden Woods. There is a forest on the outskirts of Hollowvale, known among the locals as Blackwood Forest. Its name is whispered in hushed tones, and its boundaries are marked by weathered signs that read "Keep Out." Children are warned never to stray near, and even the bravest hunters avoid its shadowy depths. They say the forest is alive, that it breathes and watches, and that those who enter never return. For decades, the stories have persisted. Tales of ghostly figures, unnatural whispers, and the eerie sound of laughter echoing through the trees. But nothing compares to the horror that unfolded when a group of friends decided to challenge the legend. The Dare. It was a cold autumn evening when the group gathered at the edge of Blackwood Forest. The air was thick with anticipation and the faint scent of decaying leaves. Sarah, the ringleader, held up her phone and smirked at the camera. "All right, guys," she said, her voice steady despite the chill that seemed to radiate from the trees. "We're about to prove that Blackwood Forest is nothing more than a creepy old story." Beside her stood Daniel, her skeptical boyfriend, MIA, the quiet artist with a penchant for the supernatural, and Jake, the adrenaline junkie who lived for dares like this. They carried flashlights, a few snacks, and a single rule: no one turns back. As they crossed the threshold into the forest, an unnatural silence enveloped them. The usual sounds of crickets and rustling leaves were absent, replaced by an oppressive stillness. The path was barely visible under the canopy of ancient trees, their twisted branches resembling skeletal hands reaching for the sky. "This place is already giving me the creeps," MIA muttered, clutching her sketchbook tightly. "That's the point," Jake replied with a grin. "It's supposed to be scary." Sarah led the way, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Just stick together. We'll be fine." The first sign. An hour into their trek, the group stumbled upon an old, crumbling cabin. Its windows were shattered, and the door hung ajar, creaking softly in the faint breeze. Carved into the wood above the entrance were the words, "Leave while you can." "What the hell is this?" Daniel asked, shining his flashlight over the eerie message. "Probably some prank from years ago," Sarah said, though her voice betrayed a hint of unease. Jake pushed the door open, revealing a single room filled with broken furniture and strange symbols scrawled on the walls. At the center of the room was a dusty mirror, its surface cracked but still reflecting the faint glow of their flashlights. "Let's get out of here," MIA whispered, her eyes fixed on the mirror. "This place feels wrong." As they turned to leave, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The group froze, their breaths hitching. Jake yanked at the handle, but the door wouldn't budge. Then came the whispering. Soft at first, like the rustling of leaves, but growing louder and more distinct. Voices overlapped, speaking in a language none of them recognized. The mirror began to vibrate, its cracked surface warping and twisting. "Run!" Sarah screamed. The door flew open, and they bolted into the forest, their flashlights bobbing wildly. The whispers followed, a relentless tide of sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The vanishing. They didn't stop running until they reached a clearing. The group collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. But when they looked around, they realized something was wrong. "Where's Jake?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. They called his name, their voices echoing through the trees, but there was no response. Daniel suggested they go back, but MIA shook her head. "He's gone," she said, her eyes wide with fear. "The forest took him." Sarah refused to believe it. "We can't just leave him. And what if we're next?" MIA shot back. "This place is cursed. We should." Her words were cut off by a blood-curdling scream. It came from deeper within the forest, and it sounded like Jake. The entity. The scream propelled them forward, driven by equal parts fear and hope. The forest seemed to shift around them, the trees closing in, their branches clawing at their clothes. The air grew colder, and the whispers returned, louder and more menacing. They found Jake near the edge of a blackened pond, his body twisted unnaturally. His eyes were open, but they didn't seem to see. Instead, they stared into the void, unblinking and empty. "Jake!" Sarah cried, shaking him. "What happened?" He didn't respond. Instead, his lips moved, forming words that didn't belong to him. "It watches. It waits. It feeds. As he spoke, the water in the pond began to ripple. A shadowy figure emerged, its form shifting and amorphous, its eyes glowing like embers. The whispers crescendoed, turning into a deafening roar. "Run!" Mia screamed. But it was too late. The entity surged forward, its tendrils reaching for them. The escape. Daniel grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her away from the pond. Mia followed, clutching her sketchbook like a lifeline. They ran blindly, the entity's presence pressing down on them like a physical weight. The forest seemed alive now, the trees swaying and groaning as if in agony. They burst through the underbrush and onto an old trail. The whispers faded, and the air grew still. For a moment, they thought they were safe. But when they looked back, they saw the shadowy figure standing at the edge of the trail, its glowing eyes fixed on them. "It's not over," Mia said, her voice barely audible. The aftermath. The three of them made it back to the town, but they were never the same. Jake's fate remained a mystery, his twisted body disappearing along with the forest's unnatural stillness. Sarah couldn't sleep, haunted by nightmares of glowing eyes and shifting shadows. Daniel grew distant, his once skeptical mind shattered by what he had seen. And Mia? She disappeared one night, leaving behind only her sketchbook. Inside were drawings of Blackwood Forest, each more disturbing than the last. The final page showed the shadowy figure, its tendrils reaching out, and beneath it, a single word. Hungry. Epilogue. The legend lives on. The townsfolk whispered of the events, their fear of the forest rekindled. Blackwood Forest remained off-limits, its dark reputation ensuring no one dared to enter. But some nights, when the wind howled and the moon hid behind the clouds, you could hear the whispers. They say the forest remembers. And it's always hungry.